We've been getting a lot of questions lately about the specific treehouse attachment hardware and how it works and the measures in place to ensure that it doesn't harm or kill the tree. A lot of people wonder, how can you install this type of hardware into a tree and not kill it? And the reality is, in a tree like this one specifically is a red maple. It's a hardwood tree. And this hardware is actually penetrating the tree and goes all the way through. So there's a hole that's 1 3/8 that goes all the way through the tree. And then two of these pieces here, and this is the XL through is what it's called. And it's actually tapered at the end. So it's 3 inches here, tapers down to that 1 3/8 and cinches into the tree. And the reality is, when you're penetrating a tree like this, you are cutting off some of the xylem and phloem. And the xylem and phloem, they're those vascular membranes that carry the nutrients through the xylem. They're going to carry the water and nutrients up to the branches and out to the leaves, and the buds will form and create the leaves. And then the phloem that are coming and bringing all the sugars down and storing the roots for winter. And we're in fall now, so very shortly that's going to be happening where the tree goes dormant, but it's storing all those sugars so that when next year comes around, everything's going to push back up through the xylem and start that process again of creating the buds. The leaves will come out. And so when you're penetrating a tree like this, if you go in the first 2 inches or so into a tree, you are then cutting off the xylem and phloem in that area. So if you picture a hole like this, you'll be cutting them off in that area. The very interesting and amazing thing about hardwood trees is they tend to compartmentalize those wounds. So they'll create new pathways. And I'm sure you've seen it on trees where they've split and they start to create reactionary growth that curls around. And those are new pathways of those xylem and phloem that are going to carry those nutrients up and down the tree to continue to keep it healthy and strong. And so by doing this, we're actually in a better position than if we were to gusset a tree, for example, which is another method people use for putting structures in trees. And that's where you're actually putting something around the circumference of the trunk of the tree. And that's not necessarily a bad approach, as long as you're continually moving that hardware that you have away from the trunk of the tree. Because if you envision that piece of hardware around the circumference of a tree, and if you don't move it, the tree is going to continue to grow outward. And as a tree grows outward, that hardware is going to stay put. And so eventually, as the tree grows out, it's going to grow around it, and that's going to cut off the xylem and phloem, and that's going to cut off the ability for the tree to transfer those nutrients and store those sugars. So by penetrating a tree in this way, as long as you're doing it in a way that there's no kind of disease or fungus or anything getting into those wounds you've created, then the risk is fairly low that it's going to have a detrimental impact on the tree. Now, one of the major concerns we have in building in trees, and I should say there is a risk to putting a structure in a tree. It's a living thing. So there is a chance, of course, and a tree, as we know, will die at some point. So I think an important thing to touch on is that there should always be redundancies in place. So when we built this structure, we're relying on this tree here as our main support for a full half of the structure, but we've built it and designed it in such a way that, heaven forbid, if something ever happened to this tree, we'd be able to drop some posts and support the hardware, and we have that redundancy in place. But we've done a lot of work to ensure that this tree can continue to survive for years to come. Some of the things that we've included are ensuring that that as a tree grows, and this is another good question people have had. Most people know that a tree grows outward, so it's got rings that you see in the heartwood and sapwood inside, and they grow out as you go. But a tree only grows taller from the top up, so the structure is never going to move. These are never going to move up. The tree is going to grow out though, and it's going to continue to grow along the hardware. And so this hardware has all been designed that we've put it reasonably close to the tree to ensure that it has optimum strength in supporting the structure. But as a tree grows, we can move all this hardware out further and further, and at a point, many years down the road, if we need to, we can add onto the end of all this hardware and continue to move it out as it grows. And it's important to have these things in place because right now everything's fine, but as a tree grows, you need to ensure that you've accounted for that. And that's why we've put the joists and all the framing far enough away that we've got decades before it's going to grow into any of the major framing or joist work. In this particular build, we built using 2 trees and some supplementary posts that support the other side of the structure. Now this tree, being the bigger of the 2, it's 18 inches in diameter, is the main fixed point for this structure. It's what's keeping the structure plumb and sound from a lateral point of view. And this is our fixed point. So at this point, not much is going to move. But when we move over to our sugar maple here, it's only 12 inches in diameter. It does have a little more movement, and it's our secondary support. And it also has hardware, the same type of hardware that's gone through the tree over here. The difference being there's no fixed point here. So on the tree, we've got the hardware and then some brackets and some high density plat the joist sits on. And what's going to happen is the trees move independently of one another, and they need to continue to be able to do that. If the trees were attached at all and they tried to move independently, that could cause them to have some energy that's transferred down to the trunk, could cause splitting in the trunk or any kind of damage that would not allow the tree to continue to grow naturally. And so as the trees move in a heavy wind, the joists will stay where they are, but the tree will actually move on that hardware underneath the joists. And that's a really important factor in building in the trees, is that we're doing everything we can to ensure that they can continue to move and grow as they naturally would, which is a very important piece here.